I'm Bryce Butler from Access Ventures, and this is More Than Profit, a show where I talk with founders, investors, entrepreneurs, and leaders of all kinds about living and working with purpose, how they do it, and why. Whenever I talk about the blockchain, it feels either super cool and out of this world, quite literally, or strange and hard to understand. You cannot turn on business news today, or in the past 18 months at least, and not hear something new related to cryptos and the world they inhabit. At Access Ventures, we've always made direct investments. And in the earliest days, we invested in technology for financial inclusion and technology for social good. And as our thesis developed further, we saw the blockchain as a cornerstone of a future with more inclusive economies. On this season of More Than Profit, it was therefore important for us to include a blockchain solution. Our goal with this season is to expand everyone's thinking about financial returns and impact, but also to introduce with this episode an exciting company leveraging the blockchain to do it. This week, I was able to get some time with Blake West, one of the co-founders of Goldfinch, a decentralized lending protocol for loans without collateral that generates significant yield for crypto holders while improving access to capital for borrowers in emerging markets. Goldfinch is figuring out ways to harness the energy of decentralized finance yield chasers with underfinanced small businesses and individuals around the world. What's exciting as well is to learn about Blake's background in music and literally teaching himself to code in order to build an app for teaching music to children. To go from Wharton to the music scene in Austin, Texas, to Coinbase as a senior engineer, and now co-founder of an impressive company is an amazing journey that all began in Baltimore, Maryland.
I was born in Baltimore, Maryland. For those who aren't familiar, it's just about an hour outside of DC. And grew up. My dad was a banker. My mom was a nurse, and I'd say pretty like kind of normal middle class life growing up in Baltimore. And then in college, I spent. I was at Wharton, so I was doing business school there, and I think I kind of did that because I really wasn't that sure what I actually wanted to do, but I vaguely liked this idea of starting businesses or starting stuff. I was definitely I remember doing lemonade stands and stuff as a kid. I've liked having a bit of that entrepreneurial spirit. Started clubs and stuff in high school and things like that. That was the only vague direction I had, but I wasn't really sure. And then it turned out that actually in business school, most of what they're preparing you for is to be an investment banker or a consultant. And so by the time that was ending, I was realizing that I saw the writing on the wall of oh, that's what you do coming in here. And so I didn't really want to do that. And then I've had this other kind of very strong passion throughout my life, which has been music. And so I was in a band in college, and at the end of college, I decided I was I don't want to do any of this business stuff. I don't want to be a consultant. I don't want to be a banker. Let's just do a band. And so me and the guitarist from that band left, and we didn't have any jobs or anything, but we just went and moved to Austin, Texas to do music full time. And so that's what I did there for 4 years. I played in a bunch of bands, produced some albums, taught a lot of lessons.
Wow.
Just was kind of living music life, making zero money.
Living the dream.
Yeah, no, but it was fun. I had a great time, and met a lot of great people, a lot of great experiences. I was really different lifestyle. Even grew up in Baltimore with my parents, to being a really broke musician. And along the way, I actually started a music lessons company while I was there. So I had a bunch of teachers, not a bunch. I had a handful of teachers who kind of worked for me, and I would give them lessons. I taught a lot of lessons myself. And that was also the time when I worked on one of the first, actually the second project with my co-founder, Mike, who started Goldfinch with me. Me and him, while we were in Austin, we did this. We created a new music notation system to try and make it easier for kids to learn how to read music. And that's called Hummingbird Notation. You can still find it online. It actually had a pretty good response, but when we kind of announced it, but it was it turns out it's really hard to create a music notation system that everybody uses. You need a lot of infrastructure and stuff around you, and you need to translate thousands of pieces of music and things. So we kind of let that go aside, but that was one project that I was working on with my now co-founder. And anyway, along that path, I was trying to I wanted to create an iPad app for kids to learn how to play piano. And so I was doing these like YouTube videos, teaching kids how to play songs. And then I was trying to use this new music notation system we were coming up with. And I wanted to have an iPad app that had a great experience for kids to use these videos as learning tools. And so like I found a developer to help build that for me, because at the time I didn't know how to do any software development of any kind. And I didn't, like, no one around me did software development when I was growing up. My high school didn't have any software classes. There was just like no tech, really anything. But I thought this tech stuff was kind of cool. So I was finding developers to build stuff for me. This was actually the third time I'd found a developer to build stuff for me. Before I tried to create a Facebook app for like getting sports events together. And I'd also tried to create a music collaboration website while I was still in college. And so by this third time I was like, oh, maybe I should like teach myself how to do some of this coding. And so I started getting books and things and started teaching myself how to code and was taking online courses. This was also right around the time when like Coursera and Udacity were first coming out. And so I was taking all those free classes and started doing that for like a year or so. And that's also then like around 2013 was right when the very first software boot camps started.
Yeah, I remember those.
So there was like Dev Bootcamp and what was the other one? There was Hack Reactor, was one I actually went to, and then there was some third ones that were all at then. And so ultimately, I heard about these boot camps. I was like, oh my god, in 12 weeks you can make 6 times what I'm making right now. This is and I was sort of after 4 years of being a musician, I was like, maybe it's time to like try something else. And so that's when I applied to Hack Reactor. I was fortunate enough to get in and came up here to San Francisco to do that. And so that's what brought me to the Bay Area. That was in mid 2013. And so that's here.
Pretty. Yeah. So you've been in the Bay Area since 2013. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's pretty interesting. So from a pretty standard middle class kind of upbringing, Baltimore, music kind of. You did go to a great school. I mean, Wharton, amazing business school. I'm curious because I've had several friends who had just brilliant finance minds, but also were really good musicians. Have you ever thought much about that, or just kind of like your ability to kind of what is it that about kind of this one gentleman I'm thinking about in particular? He was a CPA, great at finance, and an unbelievable saxophonist. I mean, the guy could just play. So
yeah, it's funny you bring up the like finance music connection. So personally, I haven't seen. I guess maybe I don't talk with enough finance people or something to know the music connection side of that. But I've seen a big connection between engineers and music.
Yeah, I bet.
Like it's just a insane percentage of engineers that I know are either like really into music or they actually play a lot. And like it seems to be like really high, like 30 or 40% like of the engineers I talk with are either like going to festivals all the time, or they're actually playing, or they're producing music in their bedroom, that kind of thing. And I've had a bunch of people ask me about that, and I've talked about a bunch with the other engineers and stuff, and like I don't really know what it is. It's actually even funnier. Two of the guys who I was in a band with for a while I was in Austin, I just found out that they became engineers too. They also, like years later, they kept doing the music thing for a little longer than I did, but they also ended up doing the engineer thing. I don't really know what it is. I think maybe it's like maybe there's something about music and engineering where you take small things and you build big things out of small things, right? Like in music, you've only got 12 notes, right? You're just sitting there, and yet you got to like create all these songs and these layers and stuff on it, and you only have really like a handful of chords that get used regularly in pop music. Like it's just not that many, and you add these little building blocks. You try and craft these like multi-layered, rich songs and things. And I think engineering has a similar kind of mindset to it.
Yeah. So you're in the Bay Area. I think what's really interesting about your backstory a little bit is that you really had no exposure to tech. You just kind of stumbled into it. I mean, I'm sure you had your own like interest in gaming or technology just as a young person growing up, but just not through the education system that was an opportunity or an exposure that you might have. But then you're trying to build something. You constantly are going to other people to build it. and you start to figure out maybe I could do this myself, and kind of teach yourself and take some courses on how to become a software engineer. I mean, that's pretty impressive trajectory, but I think one that's helpful because it's not that formal education system that I think a lot of people have always turned to, and I think has really kind of flipped our educational system upside down of late, is that you can go and do get this training in a very short period of time and make some decent money.
It's kind of a unique job in that way. It's one of the only like seriously professional jobs, I think, where there's not a lot of requirements, right? There's no legal license you have to get. There's no state-by-state license on being a software engineer. And as the boot camps prove, it doesn't take years of training. It takes months of training, which is just, that's so much less time. You're talking about, many multiples of less time required in order to become a software engineer for a job that has a ton of flexibility, a ton of demand, and for the right person is really a lot of fun. I've told so many Lyft drivers about software stuff. They would ask me, "What do you do?" And I would tell them, I did the Tech Manager thing. It was real short. I didn't even do tech before. They're all like, "What? I want to do that." And I'm like, "Yeah, you should do it. Like, go for it. It's right there." I just think it's really inclusive in that way that so many people can do it, and you don't even need to go to a school at all. You can just teach yourself. There's so many free online resources. It feels like a lot of other jobs try and put up barriers to other people getting in, and software is like, no, please, we need as many as we can get. Come on in.
Yeah. And I have to believe too, like there is the training, the individualized, just you learn it, it's accessible. But what I've also been interested in, I'm curious about just kind of where you went from the hacker training to kind of where you are today. This idea of like kind of almost like get the basics, and then when you work, like there's more of this old school apprentice where you're going to learn a lot of this just by doing it. On the job training, kind of like trying, breaking things, putting it back together. What was that like for you, just kind of in the early days, and then getting to where you are today as, a founder of a really interesting new blockchain strategy? How did you feel that out? Were you expected on day one when you were coming to work at Coinbase, your previous job, or others, to be the expert, or was there some expectation that you're gonna break some things and fix it?
Yeah, I'd say definitely expectation you're gonna break things and fix it. Especially as a junior engineer, if you're coming in for your first job, I think it's a little different. Like if you go, when I went to work at Coinbase, I joined as a senior engineer, and that. They're not expecting you to break things. They're expecting you to have questions. They're expecting you to not know how things are going to work, and you're going to talk with your other colleagues to figure that out. But they're not expecting you to break things. You come in as a junior engineer. I got really lucky to join. Actually, my first job as an engineer, I was the first employee at a startup, at a healthcare startup, and so I was working directly with the founder / CTO on a lot of code, and so. He really was my mentor, and I was the apprentice in that relationship. It was my first job. He had 10 years of experience, and so I just learned a ton from him. And I think that model it really works well. That'd be a small piece of advice if anybody here is trying to think about getting into software. Like try and find a job where you can have a mentor who's likes mentoring people. It's fun for certain engineers. Others don't like doing it, and they want to just code, and that's totally fine, but there are some who really enjoy doing it. Find one of those people. If it's early on, it's going to be invaluable to you.
So what was it like? No, that's super helpful. I think the advice of a mentor, because you're right though too, because not everybody wants to be a mentor. Not everybody's a good mentor. So,
they're great engineers.
You know what I mean? Like some people.
Yeah.
Exactly. Some people just want to crank, just leave me alone. I love doing the code. I don't want to really help. And that's fine, and so I think it's good. It's a good word of advice to, be intentional about finding someone that is interested in kind of instilling that in the next person, the next generation.
Yeah. Ask questions of your employer. Say, do you guys do mentorship programs? Like who am I going to be working with? And talk to them, see if they're into that thing. Those are easy questions to ask, and people will give you straight answers on it usually. Yeah.
That's great. So early days, so you joined Coinbase, I don't know, 2018, I think it was.
Yeah, it was 2018.
Yeah. So, right around the time kind of there was the massive crypto dip. How did you find yourself at Coinbase? Was it something where you personally were interested in digital currencies? Was it another tech job, at least when you first went to it? I mean, I know kind of in the Bay Area, you kind of do that. People jump from one job to the next. What was that for you when you went to Coinbase and were a senior engineer there?
Yeah, so that was that was in 2018. So I'd been doing engineering for about 4.5 years or so at that point, all at that healthcare startup where I was just mentioning. And so I was, it was a mix of I was interested in digital currency stuff. I'd been paying attention to it. Sort of, I knew about it since 2013. My co-founder Mike has been much more into it, I'd say, earlier on than I was, and we were having conversations about it and stuff. I got more into it during 2017, the big run up. Obviously, there was a lot of news coverage, and started to that's when I was like, okay, let me read the Bitcoin white paper and let me see what's going on here, and started to kind of get it a little bit more. And I was getting pretty interested in crypto. At the same time, I was also starting to say hey, I think I want to move on from this startup. I think I want to just get into a different experience. Maybe work with either a larger company or just have a different set of engineers that I'm learning from. And so I was, so in the back of my mind, just looking for a new job in that way. And so my co-founder Mike, he had started to work at Coinbase as well. And so he was encouraging me. He was like, hey, I think you should check out Coinbase. It could fit really well. You like crypto and you're looking for a new gig. And so I did. And so that was sort of what got me looking at it. And I was, very intrigued by crypto. I think then I probably couldn't tell you really concretely oh, I think crypto is going to do X, Y, Z. It was just still so new, but it seemed like it held so much potential. And I think, just the more that I've been in the space, the more I see that potential clearer, and the more I see crypto as being a really potentially just fundamentally different way to organize digital life. And I think as digital life becomes more and more important, crypto is going to be playing a bigger role there. And a lot of it's kind of just this mirror image of the normal internet. The regular internet is all about abundance, and crypto actually is kind of all about scarcity. And regular internet, you have companies owning all your data. Crypto is about you owning all your data. On a regular internet, it's very kind of fragmented, but in the crypto space, we're all in one single data source and one single set of truth that we have. And so I'm just been super excited about it. I think it's going to be really interesting to see how crypto especially takes things like marketplaces and decentralizes the ownership there, so that you think an Airbnb or an Uber. This was one of my sort of light bulb moments when I was starting to get really deeper into crypto, was realizing oh my goodness, you could have all the data that Uber or Airbnb have, but you could have 20 interfaces on top of them, all using the same data, right? And so instead of Airbnb having a monopoly on all that data there and being able to charge excess rates, we're all owning that data ourselves. There can be many interfaces. We can all choose the interface that we like, and they're going to be forced to compete on things that actually customers appreciate and customers want, rather than just being able to kind of sit on their data monopoly and force you and say you have no other choice but to pay whatever fee we want to charge. I think that's going to be some really cool use cases, and of course, tons of others like what we're doing at Goldfinch. But I'll kind of pause there and go into the rabbit hole of the crypto stuff. But yeah, that was kind of my road to Coinbase.
No, that's great. And I think it is a good segue into kind of your current work at Goldfinch, because it's really impressive. We got into kind of crypto investing back in 2017, kind of as the market was pretty hot, and then it tanked, and we were pretty excited about the blockchain itself. And we saw a lot of kind of hype at that time where people were jumping on, and there were all these ICOs. And there really wasn't much there, and everybody was like, what's your strategy? There was this new ICO every day for something that really had nothing. It was just vaporware. And which was not helpful, I think, for the blockchain space, because at the end of the day, we needed to see greater adoption. We needed to see this become more ubiquitous, just to kind of how we think about everyday, interactions and transactions. But it still is not fully there, and all of these people were focusing on these on-chain solutions versus really kind of figuring out the infrastructure itself and how to make it more accessible. Specifically with, I mean, you saw at the same time folks like Jamie Dimon and all these others coming out, with all of these negative opinions towards the digital
Totally
currencies.
Crypto.
Yeah, I know. But now, over the last couple of years, there's this really interesting moment that I think we find ourselves in. And so, kind of before we get into actually specifically what Goldfinch does, I think you guys even on your website have been talking about like how this wouldn't have been possible even 12 months ago. Mm-hmm. So what are, from your perspective, like as we think about what you're building with Goldfinch, why now? What is so special about this moment in kind of our world where it makes these things possible, makes digital currencies and this ability for kind of the way you described the blockchain to be where I can kind of own and control my own identity and information versus kind of selling it all the time on the internet? Why now? Why is this a special moment for us?
Yeah, so I guess I think to talk about the why now around Goldfinch, it's I mean I'll give the very quick 5-second on Goldfinch. Is obviously we're connecting all this crypto capital with lenders around the world, especially in frontier markets, and we think there's just a really good opportunity there. But the why now comes to there's kind of 3 trends that Mike and I were seeing and that we felt made now possible, and one is that there's all this money in the crypto ecosystem, and the crypto holders are now looking for something to do with it, right? So I think for many years they were content to just kind of hodl, as the term is in the industry, or hold on to their crypto and hope that it appreciates. But now they're saying, hey, well, can I invest this somewhere? Can I save it? Can I give it to a business? What can I do with my crypto, right? And so there's this whole burgeoning decentralized finance ecospace, or DeFi, as it's called, that is trying to build out these tools and ways for people to do things with their crypto. And so just the fact that people are now looking for stuff to do and they're looking for ways to earn yield was one big trend. And that's really I popped up, and I say in the last 12 to 18 months. Another one is this rise of stablecoins. And so stablecoins, if the listeners aren't familiar, they're just like cryptocurrency, except they're basically pegged to the dollar. So they're stable. There are ones that aren't necessarily pegged to the dollar. You can have ones that are pegged to the euro or the yen, and you can have ones that aren't pegged to any fiat currency, but most of them are pegged to the dollar. And so what that means, you get all these benefits, this programmability of the transactions, this programmable finance layer, this interoperability of crypto, but you don't get the volatility. And so that means that we can now, for instance, make loans to our businesses in a currency that they're familiar with. Nobody wants to take a loan in Ethereum because obviously the price being so volatile, you have no idea what you're actually going to have to pay back. But most businesses are willing to take loans in dollars, even those all around the world. They already take loans in dollars. There's also an ecosystem of hedging instruments and things like that that's built up around dollars. And so the fact that we can plug right into that is really critical. And there's now billions, tens of billions of dollars worth of these stable coins in the crypto ecosystem, again, just kind of looking for something to do. And so that was another big change over the last 18 months. And then third thing is we're just seeing a lot more growing fiat on and off ramps. So this is making it much easier for us to turn those crypto dollars into local currency, really, almost anywhere in the world at this point. Places in Africa, Europe, Latin America, Asia, they all are having more and more liquid fiat on and off ramps. And so that lets you turn it from, say, USDC, which is this stable coin, into, say, Nigerian Naira. And that's becoming a much easier prospect. And so those 3 things are operationally, for a business to be able to take a loan in crypto is no longer this giant headache. You're not saying, hey, let me teach you about crypto. Hey, let me, all your customers need to have wallets now. You don't need to do any of that. You can just say, do you want to access an entirely new source of capital that's maybe easier and can get you money faster? Cool. We got that. And so for a lot of these businesses, it's a huge pain point for them to be raising capital. Is just there's a big gap in the market that I'm sure you guys are super well aware of between this kind of I'd say a 100K or a couple 100K to 5 million, where these businesses who are our main customers, it's really hard for them to find financing in that range because, a lot of the local capital markets in these emerging markets are kind of weak or they're not as mature. And then the foreign capital that would enter the space, they need to be writing bigger checks. They need to be writing, millions of dollars plus. And so that's where you end up seeing this gap that isn't really due to the riskiness of the business themselves. It's just sort of the nature of the current economics make it tough for there to be checks in that range. And so that's part of what we're going after, and this is part of why we think it's possible now.
Yeah. And I think one of the things you mentioned about DeFi is I think the moment is really important. The fact that these three things have come together, because like I said earlier, when we started in 2017, those things didn't exist. There was the vision for it, and people were building some solutions with those things like almost presupposed, like they almost presumed those things were already in place.
Yeah.
And then when you actually get into it, so the ideas were not necessarily bad. And it's like, oh wow, this is when a fully realized universe with a decentralized system is in place, this is possible. But no, the building blocks had not yet been put in place to make that plausible. Yep. And I think what's really interesting is over the last 18 months, those three kind of key ingredients to bake that cake, so to speak, have really kind of lined up to make it a really exciting time.
Yeah, it's similar, I think, to, we remember what Webvan from the early days of the internet was trying to do food delivery, but it was, 1999. And nobody had smartphones, nobody was used to using the internet, credit card payments weren't there, you couldn't do secure stuff in HTTPS. Like, there was just so many building blocks that weren't ready yet. Delivery networks and smartphones and stuff for your delivery drivers to make it efficient routing and stuff. None of that stuff was there. But 10 years later, a lot, or maybe longer, maybe 14 years later, those things were there, and Instacart could come along and could start saying, we're going to do this again. And I remember hearing that, Mark Andreessen, when Instacart was raising, they were like, a lot of VCs were having fears of ghost stories of like, oh, a company tried this before. It's like, yeah, a company did try it before, but the environment wasn't the same, and like just in the past, there's been other companies trying crypto lending before, and they've all failed now, up until now. And I think we're starting to see a lot more crypto lending really, really happen because these building blocks are finally there.
Yeah. So you guys recently wrote, you and Mike, that DeFi is a massive opportunity to transform access to capital, which at Access Ventures we're super focused on. But it will only be possible once it can make loans without collateral. That's what will finally open crypto lending to most people in the world. So talk to me this. So if you could walk us through like Goldfinch, what's the premise behind it, and this idea of not requiring collateral. So you mentioned Nigeria. So what does it look like for a borrower in Nigeria to access capital, and where does Goldfinch fit in?
Yeah, totally. So I think on that point, it's worth bringing up a little bit of what crypto lending looks like now with the over-collateralization. And then that'll help contrast and realize why what we're doing is different and interesting for the crypto space and for these borrowers in Nigeria. So right now, there's actually billions of dollars getting lent and borrowed on crypto, but all of it is what's called over-collateralized. And so what we mean by that is in order to borrow like $100, you need to put up $150 as collateral, right? And so to most people, you would look at that and they would go, is that even a loan? Like, what do you mean? What do you mean? Why, if I'm giving you $150, what's the point of me taking $100? I have the money. And that's a totally fair response. It's like, it's true in a lot of ways, but there's the use case is for basically for traders. So people who want to go long on Bitcoin, if you can borrow $100 of Bitcoin, even if you put up 150, you can buy more Bitcoin, and if the price of Bitcoin goes up, you can pay back your loan and you've still made money. And so this is basically getting leverage on your trades. And so that works. It's fine. It's getting billions of dollars into the ecosystem where there's like a lot of tools and stuff that's been built that can be transferred over for other use cases, but that's a very niche use case. And so that's really what we meant. We're like, if we really want to open this up to the rest of the world and get people using this money, we have to find a way to make it not over collateralized, because the whole reason that most people take loans is because they do not have the money. And so that's what we meant there. And then in terms of these borrowers in Nigeria and how this works for them, is that kind of what we should get at?
Yeah,
so like, how
that's
does it
helpful.
Work? Yeah.
Well, and I think that the third point, like where you talked about, like there's these on-off ramps, is very critical, because what you described as these over-collateralized loans are still people taking out these, and they're using it basically within the crypto universe to kind of hedge against, future potential for Bitcoin, so to speak. But now actually to translate that into a real dollar loan for a person in Nigeria that really has no understanding of the cryptos, just an easier, seamless way to access capital for what they do day in and day out. I think that's a really important distinction. And your ability is to say, like, look, we've got this whole system on the blockchain, and yet we haven't figured out how to get dollars and cents into the bank or the pocketbooks or the or into the hands of these borrowers that desperately need it just to put food on the table. And so I think that's a really important distinction. So yeah, in Nigeria, how does Goldfinch work with these crypto holders that are looking for some sort of yield and help this borrower in Nigeria?
Yeah. So let's just walk through how that works today. And so for some context, we are live today on Ethereum, and we've already dispersed about $1 million worth of loans to our first 3 borrowers, who are one in Latin America, another in Nigeria, another in Southeast Asia. And so let's walk through the Nigeria case. So we work with this borrower. It's called QuickCheck, and they make sort of ML powered loans. They have like a data science team. They take data off people's phones. They're able to underwrite them very quickly and then give them personal loans. And so they, as I was saying, there's this big gap in the market. So there's trouble finding loans for that business in the range of this kind of few $100K to $5 million is tough. And so when we talk with them, they're like, yeah, sort of, if you're willing to make loans that thing, like we're willing to talk with you and we're willing to use crypto. And so the way that this works in practice, we have created smart contracts that live on the Ethereum blockchain. And we went out and raised a $1 million pool that we would use for lending from just people on our network, individuals and businesses who have extra crypto stablecoin that they want to lend out, earn some return. They put that money into our smart contract. So off the bat, that's actually one interesting component. Like, we didn't raise a fund. There's no legal entity that we started. There's no SPV. There's no nothing. We just said, hey, do you want to invest? Put money in the smart contract. And they did. That was it. So like, that's already innovation in a way of like, it was just much easier to create that quote unquote fund, if you will.
Very sure. Yeah.
And so they deposit money to this smart contract, this USDC. That's one of these stable coins I was mentioning. And then we, as the Goldfinch team, we found QuickCheck and we said, hey, we think this is a great business. We want to make a loan. And so we worked out an interest rate with them. We worked out a credit limit, and we worked out a repayment cycle, that whole thing. We actually signed a legal agreement with them. So in that sense, it was relatively normal. And then for them, on their side, what it looks like is we said, okay, in order to access this money, you need to use a crypto wallet. And so they, since they're a business, they're willing to learn some stuff here, right? And that's fine for them. There's just one person at their company who needs to use this wallet. They come to our front end. We have like a website, app.goldfinch.finance, and it lets them, they come on, they use their wallet, and they're able to draw down from this pool up to their credit limit. And so they're able to draw down, several $100,000 in USDC. And then they go to an exchange. So they went to Binance. And Binance is a big global exchange that has, entities kind of all around the world. And they turn that money into their local currency, into Naira. And from there, they go about their business, right? They do things like normal. And so by doing that, that is getting money into the hands of all these people into Nigeria. And just for them alone, we're talking about thousands of people who've been able to basically get access to this capital that was sitting in the crypto ecosystem that otherwise that connection couldn't have been made. And so our relationship is with QuickCheck. It's not directly with the end borrowers. And so QuickCheck pays us back on a monthly cadence, and they do everything in reverse. So they take some Naira, they end up turning it into USDC, and then they pay us back.
Yeah, that's great. And I think that what you figured out, we have some examples for that kind of on the traditional finance side, just these intermediaries that are able to aggregate and then to basically provide, the credit for these lending agencies to then go and work with businesses on the ground. And so it's a pretty interesting thing. I think, the innovation around the smart contract, it's nice that you paused there, because I think sometimes we kind of buzz past this stuff, but it's pretty revolutionary what you were able to do by creating a smart contract and to gain access to capital in a sense that now is supporting businesses in Nigeria and in places around the world. Mm-hmm. So with the smart contract, was that a pretty easy process, or is that something that was tedious, or is that something that came rather simple? What was that like in developing kind of the smart contract for you all?
Yeah, so developing smart contracts is tough to do well. It is, I'd say it's like any engineering in some ways, in that you need talented engineers to build things that are safe, to build things that are going to work correctly. We do the smart contract isn't just an empty vessel to hold money. We also have a lot of logic to make sure that the accounting of the loan is done correctly, that we know when they're supposed to be paying back, that we have, there are penalties if they don't pay back on time. There are these limits. We have to make sure that they can only take out the amount of money that they say they can take out. The interest rate needs to get calculated correctly. And of course, one of the big things about working on the blockchain is that the Ethereum ecosystem is a much more slightly technical adversarial environment than a normal software development. So because everything is in one big pool, well, like anyone can kind of access your contracts, right? Anyone can see your code. Anyone can look at your functions. You just don't have nearly as much control over the environment because it's this one big shared place. So a lot of people refer to it kind of like a dark forest or like a jungle. You got to be worried. And so security is a much more involved and much more important aspect of developing on the Ethereum ecosystem as opposed to doing normal, web development. And
yeah, and then
so I mean,
it took
us months to build this, and you get your code audited in the blockchain world, and so our code has been audited by a third-party firm who is their whole purpose there is to look for bugs and exploits that could be possible for attackers to exploit, in which case they might be able to steal money from your smart contracts. Hacks have happened repeatedly in the Ethereum ecosystem, and they continue to happen. And so it's a dangerous world out there in Ethereum, and you got to do your smart contract right, which is why it's tough. But we have fantastic engineers on the team that we've hired from Coinbase, and I'm working to build them as well. And we use these third-party firms and try and follow best practices. And I think the industry as a whole really is making significant progress here. It's moving so fast. And what's great about software and the Ethereum ecosystem is like every time one of these hacks happen, it's another way for the whole ecosystem to level up its security game. Like everyone can make the improvement, and then we can like sort of shut off that attack vector, and everyone learns from it. The ecosystem is very open in that way. Like all of the attacks have postmortems, all the audit reports are public. So everyone's really like working together to create a safe system, which is why I think some people can get scared, like, oh, they see these hacks happening and they think, oh, I don't want to put my money into Ethereum. But I think this is an anti-fragile ecosystem. And as every one of these problems actually just makes the whole ecosystem stronger. And within a few years, I would not be surprised if this is, the safest place to put your money.
Yeah. No, I think that's helpful. And I'm glad you took some time to go into kind of the difficulty and the complexity of building a smart contract. Because I think that's important to remember. And that's essentially what your team at Goldfinch is doing, is you're working to make this secure and seamless. And it's not just, a piece of paper like a legal document or, a term sheet that might have been more familiar with investors, but something that really needs to be protected and tested and audited and proven and constantly refined and updated to ensure the security and compliance and all of those things, which is super important. Because you're talking about, again, your goal is to get money into the hands of borrowers that have no knowledge of the blockchain, to help businesses in emerging markets. But you can't do that if you lose everybody's money. So it's you've got to create, a good smart contract. You've got to create something that's trustworthy, reliable, something that people are willing to put their money into, something that's going to generate yield for them. Because one of the things I wanted to talk about too is I think sometimes the type of business you guys have been building at Goldfinch, some people would look at that and say, well, that's concessionary, or they're doing good work, they're helping businesses in Africa or Mexico or wherever. But those are high risk, low probability of return. And so in order to do that, we're actually going to have to then be willing to sacrifice return on our part. But that's not at all what you're trying to build here. Like, talk to me a little bit about like you're really building if I'm going to lend through your smart contract, what type of yield should I be expecting from that?
Yeah. So right now we're offering our investors, we say sort of 10 to 15% per year in dollar terms is the range there. And yeah, I mean, just to speak, we definitely don't want to be doing, the high risk loans where we think there's low probability of return, right? We want this to be safe returns, or at least as safe as you reasonably can get with returns like this. And so, we're working kind of with the same companies, same deals that you would often see private credit funds working with. And in fact, a lot of our underwriting and our deal structuring is done by Rennick Pally, who is the founder of Stratos Technologies. And so he's got a lot of experience doing these exact kind of underwriting deals and structuring and stuff. And so, we're not taking a fast and loose approach to the companies we work with. We want to make sure we're working with great companies. And this is kind of part of the whole thing here is we think there's actually a lot of great opportunities for return for people to get. And, in a lot, especially the developed markets of, America and Europe, like bonds are super low right now. And it doesn't look like those are going to change anytime soon. And so people are really just like starving for opportunities to get yield. But yet you see these private credit funds that are still offering like pretty strong returns in like the 7 to 15% range per year. And we're saying like, well, can we give everyone access to that? We're like, we really want to be able to try and level that playing field. And we think crypto has a really unique opportunity to do that in the medium term. This kind of gets a little bit, because right now our stuff is restricted to accredited investors in the U.S. or international investors. But our V2, which I can't really give too many details about that right now, but rest assured that our V2 system, which we want to be much more decentralized, we want to make sure that has access for everybody to be able to invest in these kind of deals.
Well, and I love that. I mean, because I think there's, if we were to sit here and talk about like Goldfinch should be doing these things, but the reality is you've got to slow walk this. You've got to build the smart contract. You've got to beta test it. So you've done that with $1 million in these kind of 3 different partnerships. You've got to, demonstrate you can actually do this. Then you start to, incrementally grow that over time. And I think that's just wisdom. That's wisdom in business and just in life, is just to kind of like, hey, we've got this vision for where we could go. And then and things are in place to make that possible, but we don't want to do this and just become yet another type of venture that just like, yep, I told you so. Kind of like you mentioned the Instacarts of the world. People this ghost fear of like, well, somebody has already tried this. It's like, yeah, I mean, for sure, and we could be one of those things, but there's a time and a place and an opportunity for us to kind of go slowly, incrementally, and in the next 5 years see something really important happen. So it's good to hear you say that.
Iterative mindset of Silicon Valley that Mike and I have both been working in tech for a long time, and so we want to bring that mindset here as well. We get this pilot off the ground, and we have plans even the next months to be just adding one more thing, piloting new things, asking ourselves what are the hypotheses that we're missing that still need to be tested out, and try and test those as we go. But we think I don't think it's going to be 5 years. I think we can have something really cool within maybe even another year.
That's great. And the speed of crypto, I say 5 years. It's it's a lot. It's been a lot faster of late, which is great. Yeah. So give me a vision. So from Blake's perspective, Goldfinch, what is the fundamental underlying thing? Access to capital, businesses and emerging markets. Like, I've got to believe that what you're building right now has applications in other. So give me a vision of the world as this thing continues to mature. What does the flow of money look like? How does it impact business? How does it impact communities like in Nigeria, where access to capital is one of the biggest inhibitors for economic progress, economic mobility, prosperity for individuals? Like, what are we able to potentially realize with a solution like this?
Yeah, sure. So, if we want to really look at that kind of longer term vision, I would say that a lot of our kind of vision here is based on two like core beliefs that we have at Goldfinch. One is that investors around the world are going to be looking for new sources of yield, and they're going to be demanding access to these new sources of yield. You see that in the low bond yield environments that that probably aren't changing. You see that in increased participation in the retail stock market, at least in the developed worlds. All these people are just like, I need something to do with my money because I can't get any return in bonds anymore. And then another belief is around just more and more economic activity is going to be happening on chain. And we think, you see versions of this actually with some of our partners in Nigeria. It's really interesting. We've talked to 3 different partners there, and some who work with businesses and some who work with consumers. And they're all interested in giving their customers crypto wallets because the customers are demanding it. And you might think it's because they want to like speculate on Bitcoin or ETH, but it's not. It's because they view holding onto crypto as a safer alternative than holding onto the Naira. And so they want to be holding onto crypto dollars like USDC because they're like, I want my money in dollars, but they can't get dollars in the normal ecosystem, right? And so from our perspective, you look at that, that's like saying, oh man, like merchants are asking for crypto accounts, consumers are asking for crypto accounts, they think it's a safer place. It's inevitable that those consumers and merchants are going to start interacting directly on the crypto ecosystem between each other, right? And I think this is going to be happening in a lot of places around the world. And so those things together, we think like eventually crypto is going to be creating a system where someone can like extend a loan for any transaction that happens in the world, right? And a way to think about that is it's kind of like you're building an open source Visa rails, right? Right now, like when you swipe your credit card and you pay with your Visa card, a big bank is going to be providing the credit to actually make that happen, right? Visa is not the one who's actually providing the credit there. And so we're saying, well, if you have open source Visa rails, like what if anyone can be that lender, right? It's not just the big banks who are providing the credit. What if any person in the world could do that, or a smart contract could do it, right? So imagine this example: for someone in Lagos wants to get their car repaired because it broke down the other day. They go to the repair shop, and one of our smart contracts provided with credit to people who are looking for opportunities to earn yield. They provide it to a smart contract which can look at this person's look at some of their history on chain or understand what they're doing. They can send the money directly to the repair shop in Lagos from the smart contract, and then later on they can get repaid because maybe that person's employer is paying them back on chain, and we can see, all right, well, they're going to be having an income, so we trust that they're going to be able to pay this back at some point, and they can pay back the smart contract, and all that stuff that full flow of funds, that full life cycle can happen on chain. And that money theoretically could have come from anyone. Could have come from someone in Siberia. Could have come from someone in Latin America. And all those people are getting to participate in the economic activity and gains of that transaction. So I think that's really this real vision of crypto.
That's great. Is there anything at this point? Because it sounds like you said, there are things in place. Is there anything right now that kind of gives you pause or you're concerned about? You mentioned some of the security issues on the Ethereum network and some other things, but like as you look at the landscape of blockchain and kind of where we are today, is there anything that you're still kind of watching and just like, okay, I want to this gives me pause, or this still yet needs to be developed, or there's too much vaporware out there, so it's still too confusing, or the mainstream? What is it that you look at and you're like, these things still need to improve in order for us to fully realize that vision for the future?
Yeah, so I think there's probably a couple things. One is generically referred to as scaling solutions for the blockchain. So, right now the Ethereum ecosystem is just painfully, woefully expensive and slow, and things cost an absolutely absurd amount of money. Like even the most simple transactions can sometimes run into be $100 worth of gas fees, and for any normal person in the world, that's prohibitive. And so the good news, however, is that there are a bunch of teams and a bunch of money, and people have been working for years now on these scaling solutions. And so we're starting to see the fruits of that labor just now. It's not quite there ready for prime time, but big projects are just starting to have like alpha versions that are on like what's called a layer 2, which is just another term for a scaling solution, or they're piloting on some alternative blockchains that are much faster. And so when we're starting to see bridges that can like move money between these blockchains and things like that, and so that world I think is going to come a long way in the next year or two. And when that is in place, that's going to really open up the design space of what kind of applications are possible, who can be using it realistically, because again, I can't send money to a repair shop in Lagos for a $100 loan if it costs me $100 in gas just to send money there. And so we have to get past that, but we're going to. And I said there's a bunch of different approaches, a bunch of teams are working on this. There's like 6 or 7 or 8 different teams that are all like really legit with great investment behind them, and they've all been working for years to build this stuff. So like we're getting there. And then I think along with that, we need simpler wallets. We need wallets that everyday people can use. And when I say wallet here, this is like a wallet that a user controls, right? So when you go onto your account on like Coinbase or Binance, that's not considered a wallet because they control that. So in the crypto term, when we say your wallet, that's you control it. It's your keys. It's your money. Usually means there's no way to like easily recover that if you forget your private key or your password. But this is part of the thing where people are developing new ways to make these wallets more seamless and give you recovery options that if you do forget your password, there's a way to recover that. things like social recovery are becoming possible. So this is like, if you have your wallet, well, can I say like my mom and my best friend and this other colleague I know, they can all, if I lose my thing, they can just like reset it and say, okay, this new address, this is Blake as far as the blockchain is concerned. And so doing that and building in things with like two-factor authentication on people's phones, there's a lot of work that people are doing on the wallet front that, again, I think is also going to be coming a long way in the next year or so, and is also going to be helped a lot by scaling technologies. So that thing needs to happen. And then I would say, just in terms of pause, like not from a technical perspective, I think the regulatory stuff could be very difficult over the coming years. I think, honestly, blockchain is it's empowering a lot of people to be able to be their own bank in a way, and that's a scary, disruptive thing for a lot of governments. And so, it's also going to be pushing very hard against capital controls that countries have for their country. And so, I think those two things mean there's a bit of a collision course between the blockchain and the current financial regimes around the world. And I think the blockchain is a train you can't stop, but that doesn't mean it's not going to be a rocky road.
To learn more, check out goldfinch.finance or shoot them an email at hi@goldfinch.finance. They love to hear from people. Thanks again for listening to More Than Profit. And if you've liked what you've heard, do us a favor by subscribing and leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Bryce Butler with Access Ventures. Check out our work at accessventures.org. Thanks for listening.